Hello, Internet. You're listening to the FMG podcast. I'm your host, Carl. With me, as always, is Andy.
G'day.
And Adam.
Hello, everyone.
We've been pumping out these podcasts. We've got to make use of this new SoundCloud membership. Yes, we are on SoundCloud for your listening pleasure. And it's a whole lot better. So I recommend listening on SoundCloud. But we are also still on YouTube because we won that battle and we need to stay on YouTube as well, as we talked about before. But it's the new decade. It's 2020 in the new year, and great topics to talk about. And yeah, we're going to start off with what we think is going to happen in the next decade or two, because like every new decade, everyone kind of like makes a big deal out of things. Even though there is that debate, does the new decade start in 2021 or 2020? Have you seen that debate all over?
Yeah, let me tell you, the answer is 2020. Anyone who says 2021 is both pedantic and wrong, in my opinion.
Straight up.
I mean, it starts at zero, right? There can't be any other argument otherwise. You started 2020, all right, cool, you're moving into the new century.
Well, the reason that people say otherwise is
New
because
century?
there
is a new century?
New
decade.
Jesus.
Oh.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
Well, the reason is that in the calendar there's no year zero. There was one BC and one AD, or one BCE, one CE. So because there's no year zero, people say, oh, well, we started at year one, so this decade should be starting in 2021. But that's like, okay, you could make the argument, I would still probably disagree, but you could make the argument if you're saying we're into the third millennium, because then, okay, you're saying that, but a decade is just any arbitrary 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, how do we label them? We label them by 2010s, 2020s, 2030s, and we're in 2020. 20 is a 20.
Yeah.
So
agreed. Yeah, you don't say
that's it.
like
Job done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nah,
Demolished.
You don't say like or back in the 20s in the year 1930. Like it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
What? I get that point. But what would be a good idea is to talk about what we think, fun or serious, what is going to be a prediction for 10 years time in 2030, and then again in another 10 years time. So we're going to go around. So my prediction for 10 years time. So just to give you a bit of context, I'm not like some right-wing anti-social justice person or anything like that. By no means. I think like the social justice movement probably is for the better and things like that. But this is something I thought about that I think will happen in 10 years. So in Australia, Australian rules football, one of the most popular teams, if not the most popular team, is the Essendon Bombers. Okay,
Well, not the most popular team, I wouldn't say
Really?
anywhere close to, no.
Memberships wise,
No.
who's
No.
the most popular?
Richmond.
Carlton.
Well, it depends. It's always fluctuating in how you measure it, but I would say one of Richmond currently, although I don't expect that to last, or Collingwood or West Coast.
Okay, but they're
They're
up
the big
there.
ones.
They're in.
Yeah, Essendon are.
Well, they were at one stage. But anyway, there's a team called the Essendon Bombers,
Yeah.
and they have a fighter bomber plane as their logo, and their mascot at their games is a like a fly, basically. Like
It's
like
a mosquito.
Mosquito.
It's based off the British fighter, I believe.
Yeah. Well, my prediction for 10 years' time is, given that the way we progressively view things is, they will have to get rid of the fighter jet bomber on their thing, because I think people complain that, like, I know it sounds stupid, but I think people say, like, you know, a fighter bomber like used in war should not be used as a logo for a team. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just have a feeling that in 10 years' time they will just change to that mosquito looking mascot.
That's such a weirdly specific
Yeah.
prediction.
Well, I was just driving past the Essendon ground. I was like, I'm surprised no one said anything, like done a Daily Mail.
Well, they're going to
article.
change the logo sometime soon anyway, because
Yeah.
that's just how these things work. Cycles of marketing, updating the marketing that's being used and stuff. I know I have heard suggestions that it's perhaps, I don't think it's a political thing necessarily. I've heard people say it's maybe in poor taste.
That's what I'm thinking. Like,
But-
I've never heard anyone say anything, so I'm surprised that it's already like been a topic of conversation.
if you go on internet forums, there'll be someone who would say literally anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
It's not on the level
maybe.
of the Washington Redskins or something like that has like.
Yeah, I think it's definitely different sort of.
The only thing I think would people would want to change it is that they find another name that suits it better. I don't think Mosquito's good enough for Essendon. Essendon Mosquitoes doesn't roll off the tongue as well as the Bombers does. It's
a strange one though, Bombers.
Look, it's a strange one. I believe it was linked in with the Essendon airfield that was there,
Yeah,
and they
that's
made
right.
Bombers around there, or they just picked it because of the airfield.
But it's like, for example, like in the Premier League, Arsenal was originally founded by workers who worked at the Arsenal.
And they got the cannon logo, don't they?
That's right. Yeah. Or in Germany, there's quite a few. Like if I remember right, Bayer Leverkusen was founded originally by people who used to work at the Bayer factory. I think what could happen, maybe, I don't think they would necessarily change the Bombers' name, but maybe they'll shift it towards more sort of old-fashioned World War II style bombers.
Not an F-15 fighter jet, which
that's
is
right.
they got now.
Yeah, because then I think it lessens the blow, if you will. If you're sort of associated with something that's old enough, long enough ago, has that legacy about it, people tend to be a bit less defensive, maybe, because even currently their logo is based on an F-111, I think, which is not in service anymore in Australia, but that's probably what I imagine one direction they could possibly go. I don't think they would ditch the Bombers altogether. I think the fans would probably.
Well, it'll be interesting to see in 10 years' time. Do you have anything to add?
What do you reckon, Andy?
As a former Essendon supporter, I think the bomber
Whoa!
they've used, yeah.
Whoa! I was not aware of this.
You have been aware of this.
No, I didn't.
I used to be an Essendon supporter. The family were Essendon supporters, except for my father, who was a Richmond supporter, and he was the only one. Basically, after Essendon had some good years and was still going quite well, I decided I wanted to do something with my dad and, take on a bit more of the family legacy. Enjoying and picked up Richmond while they were still at the bottom of the ladder, pretty much.
This really speaks to his power of persuasion. He managed to convert you when Essendon was still on top.
Exactly. Well, just cut all that out. I think that's all
right.
pretty shit.
Anyway, Adam, give us your prediction for 2030.
Look, I'm going to be my usual dickish self. Whenever we talk on this podcast, you ask me what my favourite of anything is, I refuse to answer. It's going to be the same thing. I don't do predictions.
It's just fun.
Well, look, when I was on Twitter the other day and I saw a tweet which spoke to me on a very deep level, which was, if you gave someone from the year 2010 the slightest snippet of what's going on in the year 2020, they would instantly lose their mind. Like, they would just spiral into madness.
All right.
Really?
So
I get what you mean. Like, kind of like, sorry, Andy, like 2000, when you watched 2001: Space Odyssey, like what they thought. Are you talking about that, or?
I think even just like the way that the past 5 years has gone, nobody would have picked it.
Really?
No, I
think so.
Yeah, definitely. You
Explain.
look at retrospectives from early 2010. You imagine what was available then, what was happening. Like, I've just done some basic entertainment ones, but looking at what's changed in the entertainment industry, what's happened in politics and everything, there's been a lot of...
It's not... If you're talking about Donald Trump, like, Ronald Reagan was a B-movie Hollywood actor. Like, it's not crazy. Like, America's been electing...
No.
The governor... Jesse Ventura was the governor of Minnesota. He was a professional wrestler. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor of California. He was a...
It's true, but it's also the way that we use the internet, the way that certain political groups have really pushed forward, like all the environmental groups have really pushed forward. The way Europe's going at the moment, the way China's really pushed itself out.
Yeah, Brexit, for example.
That's not new though. China's been
look, I'm not saying that where we are now has not come from an unbroken causal chain of events. Like, nothing just spontaneously happened one day and the world was totally different. All of these things have explanations, but I think there have been a lot of twists and turns that were unlikely individually, and there have been a lot of them that collectively no one would have seen where we would have ended up now. I don't think. So I think for, like, in 2020, the way things are going, my general feeling is that the world is in one of these very transitional periods, and it could go one of any of 1,000 different ways. And so I think especially now, trying to guess where things would go is a bit of a chumps game.
That's why I picked something as trivial as a team mascot logo. Like I didn't pick something that's.
So you picked something that was totally insignificant, Carl.
Well,
You're just like, oh well, if that changes, who cares?
Well, no, I mean, fair enough, but yeah. Well, I mean, I guess when it comes to predictions, like these days, I'm very politically minded these days, so I'm very hesitant. It's very difficult for me to make predictions that don't get very depressing very quickly. But I mean, not to say that I am pessimistic about the future exactly, but like I said, things could go one way, they could go the complete opposite way, and it's an exciting and extremely depressing time to be alive.
Really?
I think so.
I say the complete opposite. I think we're at a better point in humanity than we've ever been. Like, if you said to someone in 1944, like, Europe is going to finally be, with the exception of small skirmishes and stuff like in Ukraine, for the most part, Europe has gone war-free for like 10 years now. They would say you're crazy. Europe is always going to be at war. And as a whole, like the United Nations, all they've accomplished, how we work together, as how we view other people in other countries, similar to ourselves more so than ever. In the grand scheme of the world, grand scheme of human race, I think at this point, I get what you mean. It could go bad or good, but we are at the best point, like right now, to be alive. Like,
I think. Well, it's hard to talk about best and worst in absolute terms.
Yeah, because they could in 1406, it could have been absolutely amazing at one point.
Could have been in like 5000 BC. Yeah. Everyone's living in huts, having a great time.
I seriously doubt it.
You never know. You weren't there.
Yeah.
You weren't there.
Yeah, it's true. Well, Adam, just to I don't know, try and get something out of you. A positive prediction for the coming decade. What do you think? What do you think's going to be good?
I'm not going to be doing this podcast.
Well, look, I don't necessarily. I won't say it's a positive prediction, but I could maybe make a neutral prediction.
Go.
I think there's going to be a lot of change in the way that technology is made, for example. So I think this is just, I'm literally coming up with this right now, but there's been a real slowdown in quote-unquote Moore's Law. So I think we're reaching the limits of what traditional computational technology is capable of. Mm. On the other hand, there's making small strides in quantum computing. I don't think that's going to be applicable to the regular person, but there's also a lot of other interesting ideas out there with spintronics and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have interesting little mini revolutions in consumer electronics and computing. Also, I think probably we're still going to have a continued integration of computation in people's lives. There's probably going to be increased automation as well.
Yeah, it's a given.
So that will provide some interesting changes and challenges going forward.
That had to be expected though. Like when you think about,
what do you mean that had to be expected?
Okay, I'm talking.
Would you want a different prediction?
No.
My prediction's not good enough.
No. I'm talking about. It's a good prediction, but
it's too reasonable, Adam. That's what we're saying.
You want me to go wackier?
The reason why I think it's had to be predictable is because if you're referring to like literally human beings had horse and cart for like 5,000 years, and then between 1869 and 1969 we went from horse and cart to putting a man on the moon. And then that small brief period there was in the grand scheme of things. I think in 1,000 years' time, there's going to be some like stupid ancient aliens show where they think, look at this, aliens must have helped them in this 100 years. How did they have such a dramatic leap in technology in just 100 years' time?
Yeah, but I don't think things will continue in that same way. I mean, we still haven't been back to the moon with people, for example. That's not a
but technology, because the
technology. But that's not a technological problem. That's
we just found there wasn't anything on the moon.
No. But I was just using that example. We went from horse and cart to like crazy levels of technology where nothing had really progressed to that extent ever in history.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important to remember that history is not teleological. There's no end goal that's inevitable that we're working towards. Technology isn't a continuous step-by-step process. Even though I think we like to think we think that it is, but it really isn't.
I'll tell you what the end goal is. Merging my brain with a computer. That is the end goal.
No.
Once that happens, nothing else will
Carl,
matter.
you don't want that.
Yeah, I definitely do.
Well, okay, I'll give you another prediction then.
Okay.
Within the next 10 years, we still won't be back to the moon.
Yeah, I agree with that.
People are talking about going to Mars or going to the moon. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I was telling you guys about how I was watching that documentary, and people were saying exactly what I think. It was a documentary just of archival footage leading up to the moon landing, and they were saying exactly what I think people would say now, which is people like, why are you spending hundreds of $1 millions to go to the moon when we've got problems on Earth? And I think if they try and pursue a Mars mission or something like that now, it will be the same kind of response.
I mean, what drove the moon, the Apollo series and the moon missions and everything was almost a political one-upsmanship between the US and the Soviets. It was a national pride kind of thing. Like,
we need something like that, like a China-America space race to Mars.
Exactly.
Or
something. Something that isn't we're shooting each other. It's a competition. And so people are striving and pushing themselves and really pushing technology. You're getting the best minds together to be like, here's one goal, get a guy to the moon. And I mean, the amount of technological progress that was required to get people to the moon, I think it's going to be interesting to see what people decide to do with Mars. Because people are training up for it. They're setting themselves up, but I know enough people, I've talked to enough people about it who've just, they haven't given up. We're getting to Mars. It'll be, we'll send robots. Like, it's going to be robots being sent off to Mars and all that kind of
Adam
stuff.
doesn't even think they'll do the robots.
It's just
No.
easy. Well, I mean, like...
No, they may send
Well,
robots.
they've already sent a robot, technically.
I took Adams as, we're not going to send people to the moon, to Mars in the
that's
next
right.
10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a waste of money when you think about
But
it.
I think the
See, that's the thing, is that the amount of money put, like, what did the Apollo mission do? It's a great PR campaign to be like, yeah, we beat the Russians. We got people on the moon. Something that nobody else has done, and it became part of, the collective consciousness and culture of humanity. Everyone talks about the greatest things humanity's done. We got to the moon. We got a guy up to the moon and back. That's the important thing.
I'm not saying it's a waste. I think it's a waste of money sending a human being when you can send a robot with a camera on it, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard. Like, for me, I still have I'm still a bit of a dreamer when it comes to these sorts of things. I would like it if humanity went back to the moon, went to Mars, trying to set up permanent colonies. But it can't be a space race kind of thing where this is like one of the top national priorities. I think ideally, in my ideal world, it would be an international collaboration rather than a space race kind of thing, because otherwise the same thing happens. Someone succeeds or everyone fails, but more likely someone eventually succeeds, and then, all right, well,
that's it.
That's that done. And we're still stuck with the same issues we have. But also, there's like really ongoing pressing issues of climate change and stuff. That's another thing which I think is that was not the same as back in the 60s and 70s. Of course, they had Vietnam, but the way things are going, we've still got forever war in the Middle East, and they're looking to start up more. Who knows? But anyway.
Hey, look at Europe. The Middle East could be at peace in one day.
Peace in the Middle East has been a goal for a long time, Carl.
And peace in Europe was a goal for a long time, and it happened.
Anyway, look, let's not get into the geopolitics because it tends to be a bit of a difficult subject.
Yeah.
But look,
we want peace.
I've given you, with no prior preparation, 2 predictions.
And not bad. All right. Well, I'm gonna bring mine back to the personal. There's something that might affect everybody the next next decade. I think the way that you brought on this a little bit, Adam. I think when you were talking about more automation and more things in people's lives, I think especially the way that Apple's gone with the Apple Watch, just miniaturization of technology. This is something I've kind of been looking forward to a while, but kind of the idea of that you can just have a computer on you at all times, like just getting rid of your smartphone entirely, just having it as a watch or an attachable or something like that, and just having that be your personal computer. and just being able to just walk up to like any kind of monitor or anything, you literally just plug it in or anything like that, and that is literally your device. So the way your phone would work now, just imagine that miniaturized into just a watch or something like that.
No desktops, it'll all be cloud-based or whatever.
Cloud-based or storage on there would be so good that you could have that, it'd be secure enough, or you'd have cloud storage somewhere where you can just offload everything onto there, and that would become your camera and things like, at that point with cameras and all the attachable and apps that come with phones, that'd be hard to replicate. But I think like seeing big desktops or anything like that, and just having that becoming your little personal assistant, and then having an AI built in there, so you're literally having something just to manage your everyday tasks to always do that, and then how they project that, I think that'll get better as well.
I could see that by 2030.
Yeah, and
I'll even play off that.
Yeah, I reckon by 2030 for sure. Like, it might not be around for everybody, but considering the way that everyone's getting Google Homes and the Amazon ones, and the way that's all going, people are really accepting having that kind of service in their house, where people previously would have been like what was it? It was with the Xbox One earlier in the year, in this decade, they had one of the attachments for it was the Kinect, and one of the things that absolutely killed Microsoft and killed the Kinect as part of the Xbox One was that it was going to be watching you and it was going to be listening to you all the time. Like, think about that. It's gone from the Xbox One is always going to listen to you, people being like, no, we're never going to have that. Absolutely killed that part of the app, and they brought the price down. And now everyone's like, yeah, we'll have Google in our house. We'll have the Amazon. What's the Amazon one called? It's
Amazon, Home.
Home or something like that.
Google is Home. Yeah, I don't know. But
stuff
I know
like
what
that.
you mean. The attitudes have changed.
The attitudes have completely changed. Like, people are just more used to having stuff listen to you and having that, the service available to them where they literally can go, hey, Google, get me something. And I still prefer like using an old control pad or typing stuff in. I find it a lot easier. I find it a bit, I don't know, comfortable talking to a little machine that's always listening to me. But hey, maybe that'll change, or I'll just be like Will Smith in iRobot, who's still using like buttons for lights and everything like that. But I've seen people link up their whole like home system where it's speakers, air conditioning, everything into those little devices, and it's literally just walk in, lights on, aircon on. It's becoming seamless now.
I don't know if I completely agree with the premise that everyone's opinions have changed. I still see a lot of pushback and a lot of, let's say, caution about, or a lot of uncertainty about, especially always on devices. I don't think people have a problem with devices that can always listen to you in principle these days so much, but more, is that being recorded? Is that data being sent somewhere else? Is that data being misused or sold or whatever? And so I think that what you're saying is reasonable. I can see that technology will exist and be used, but I don't know if it'll be ubiquitous. I think there'll still be a pretty large portion of the population who either won't go for it or wouldn't be able to afford it.
My prediction is that it'll be a lot more the younger generation. Like, younger generation now will be fine with having that level of, I'll call it surveillance, but it's not surveillance, having like always on kind of recording and stuff always available to you. But I reckon it'll come up with the younger generation, and older generations will probably have more trouble with it. That brings up stuff like data security and everything, but I think that's a kettle of fish that's going to get real tough.
People pick and choose as well when it comes to these privacy things. I get the same people on my Facebook who will share a post about how the whole world's watching you, gathering your data, and then the next minute I see them posting about basically recounting their whole, I'm going through this medical issue and stuff like that. It's like, you're happy to post your medical...
Yeah, but it's different kinds of sharing, isn't it? Like, if
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They pick and choose. Like, this is okay. I can put this out on Facebook, so Facebook knows exactly what surgery I just did and everything like that. But I don't want them gathering data about what I shop online. Like, it's really people pick what they want.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
As long as people are informed about these things, which has probably been the biggest issue, I think. A lot of the scandals have all been when it hasn't been clear what's being recorded, what's being used for what.
I think people are becoming a lot more conscious of that. It's been a bit of a Wild West in terms of how much data can be collected. People like with the Cambridge Analytica stuff, the way Facebook runs its whole business, and Google, it's like, wow, they're collecting a lot of stuff. And like people saying, look, you're just part of a very large data set, but that's still like, think about it, that's like, you know, you're being mined for, you're making money for other people. You're kind of the commodity. It's just like, all right, well, how do I feel about that? How do I want the service to play off?
And the other thing as well is when you talk about large data sets, there's a lot of work being done now with what's called AI or machine learning, which are not really super accurate names for it. But the use of that technology is a really interesting topic that I don't want to get into in this particular podcast. But there's so many issues with ethical approaches and, like you said, commercial approaches, and how much we really understand about how they work, how much does that matter, what human biases seep into these systems. Really big topic.
Yeah. Well, again, if I can make a quick second prediction, it'll be data protection laws are going to become a lot stricter in the next decade. Like, we've had enough mistakes, enough problems with them. People are getting worried enough about them. I think governments will get a lot more on top of it. Whether they'll make good policies or anything like that, I mean, we've already seen some really dodgy ones coming out of some governments, in particular Australia, the way they data retention laws.
Someone let me know in the comments if they're similar to me. Like, I really don't care.
Look, I know plenty of people who don't care.
Yeah, every website asking me, like, we're going to do cookies and stuff. I'm like, I don't give a shit, yeah? Like, if whatever you want to collect about me, you know, what I'm doing on the internet is not something so private that I don't care. Like, I keep my private life, and when I go on the internet, it's to shop for new gadgets and talk to friends about.
That's a legit opinion to have, because think about it, the amount of people have been like, almost the scaremongering that's been, or the fear-mongering, sorry, that's come out of, you know, the collective kind of culture around surveillance. It's just like, well, when it boils down to it, they are just going, what are you looking at eBay? Oh, you looked at this thing? They'll just show you another image of it later on. Or just like, oh, you've been looking at, you know, shirts or something? We'll show you an ad for more shirts. Like, in the end of the day, a lot of this is being driven, like, especially in the commercial sense, is just by advertising. That's where Google makes a lot of their money.
I mean, for me, I used to feel that way. Less so now. I have more concerns and I take a lot more precautions with that sort of stuff. But for me, it mostly comes down to trust, I guess. So who is collecting the data? What would they want to use it for? What would they be able to infer? Because there's a lot of things that you can infer about a person statistically from where they're from, sort of people that they would talk to. You can guess a lot about them, and you can usually guess pretty accurately these days. And also just in the future, you know, maybe you're okay with people like what's currently out there now and the people who could be using it, but you never know, down the future, maybe you get involved in something, or some more unseemly people will get a hold of data that could be used against you. You never know. So for me, I try to
or even affiliation. Like, we've got messages of you talking to this person. If that person comes out to be a terrible person, convicted of all these things, like,
I mean, you're already seeing that on Twitter. Like, people, if somebody does something controversial, they associate with somebody, people just go back through their Twitter feed or their internet history until they find some dirt, and then they'll just use it as a point against them. You know, well, it's just like, you said a politically incorrect joke 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Like, you know, how dare you?
That's another big topic that we definitely don't have time to get into.
Yeah.
Predictions leading on from all this, it's regarding technology. I think by 2040... like we have dash cameras that record everything. I think everyone, when they go out, they'll have some, because cameras are getting so ridiculously small that you can like pin it to your shirt. I think when people go out, they'll just have a camera recording all the time, like a dash cam, because I think people, there's a confrontation, something like that. It's just like, I've got it all recorded. Someone says...
kind of like what, when there was that demo for Google Glass.
Like
with
that,
the glasses and a little camera inside.
Like that, but more for protection purposes. Like, did you see this? Or this person said you said this. Did you say that? I think people are just like, I'm going to keep everything recorded, and I can always use that to protect myself.
I can definitely see they're getting a lot more popular, considering that the internet's just full of those confrontation videos. People really love watching those, like seeing people have a fight. But also, whenever there is an incident, people automatically getting their phones out and just recording. Like, they're already doing that. Just having something, like, and they've got it on cars as well for any kind of bingo or something like that. And the amount of weird shit you see on those Russian dash cam videos, like, you see one with, like, some of the comets that were coming down, what was it? That was early 2010s, I think. and it's just a guy driving, and you just see this comet just like coming down. I mean, the other thing that comes with that is that all the stuff that's, you know, people getting horrifically hurt and dying and things that are now just on the internet as well, because people just recording that stuff and it's now available.
That will be a privacy issue as well, but I also think relations will be a big one.
That happening.
And it will change people's behavior as well, because when they'll be out, it's like everyone's got cameras on them in 20 years' time. I don't think this will be for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tricky one, because for me, even if you sort of predict that trend of being something that people would do, there's also practical questions of storage, because that's a lot of data to store.
Oh, I could imagine it'll be like a dash cam where it overwrites every 24 hours.
But then, of course, how long do you keep it for and all this stuff?
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, from a practical perspective, but yeah, maybe, who knows?
I'm just trying to think of other things that I'd like to have in the next 20 years.
Well, what you'd like and what you think will happen are different things.
Well, some things that will happen are some things I like, so I don't know.
Sex robots.
Andy's been making it happen. He's been working night and day.
saving.
But let's move on. Let's go.
Yeah.
So our last podcast was all centered around Star Wars. We said that we weren't going to talk about Star Wars again. Yeah. But we lied, as always, because we always come back to Star Wars.
This episode of the FMG podcast has been brought to you by our sponsor, Star Wars.
No, Disney.
Did you think that just because we said we'd never talk about Star Wars again, we were never going to talk about Star Wars again? That was a lie.
Please visit your local Disneyland. New Star Wars attractions have opened up,
well, this was my suggestion for follow-up, and there were 2 or 3 things about it that I wanted to just get on the record.
So we have one actual topic we're going to talk about after this,
which is not mine.
You want to do a quick recap of what we talked about Rise of Skywalker? We had a big episode about it.
Yeah. Well, all I wanted to say for that was at the end of that episode, we talked for so long, we covered so many things. I thought, all right, we've done it. We've said what needs to be said. And then the next morning I woke up and I remembered whole other parts of the movie that I had blocked out of my brain, and I was like, oh my god, we didn't even touch on this. It's so crazy and ridiculous, and I just wanted to say... I'm
curious now. What were these?
I don't remember the specifics, but that was the thing about the movie. So much crazy stuff happened. I think if you wanted to dissect it, you would be going for hours.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say, that was not an intentional thing, at least on my part. I was not being super choosy with what we talked about and stuff. It was just such an assault.
Assault on the senses. And,
I've been explaining to people my quick summary, because, not everyone has time to listen to me talk about Star Wars, like our amazing listeners. But,
no, Carl.
I just explained to people it appeared like 2 decent movies that were squished together into one crappy movie. I say decent movies, not good, just decent movies that got crushed together. That's the way I explain it.
But the other thing I wanted to say, since we're already talking about Star Wars, there's one thing which I think I wanted to talk about, which was, so for example, you'll come across people who've never seen Star Wars, and you might be able to persuade them to watch it. Say the A New Hope, right? And I think what usually happens is they'll walk away and they'll say, yeah, that was an okay movie. I guess some just sort of, but I don't love it that much. I guess I'm just too old to be seeing it for the first time or something like that. So that's sort of an interesting thing that I wanted to get your opinions on. 2 things. 1, do you think of yourself as a Star Wars fan? And 2, do you think that if you want to really get into Star Wars, you have to see it young? Those are my 2 questions. I have answers, but I'll let you go first.
I'll answer first. I consider myself a Star Wars fan. It's hard to explain to people I'm a Star Wars fan, but exclude this. It's like, it's really hard to explain that, but I am a Star Wars fan. And as for your question, I agree. You have to be young. There are certain movies where I look back and I'm like, if I didn't watch these as a kid, like if I watch them now, I'm just like, I don't, this is stupid. Like I can't get into it as an adult. I definitely agree. It's something that you need to have at least watched in your teenage years. You can't just jump in at 30 years old and expect to get completely invested in this kind of space fantasy.
Okay, I would still consider myself a Star Wars fan because I really enjoy what films and experiences I've had watching Star Wars. I really like watching the original trilogy of Star Wars. I enjoyed really playing the games. I enjoy the universe. I really enjoy the spaceship designs. Those were always part of, like, pretty much my favorite part of Star Wars was the technology, how it's run out. Makes New Hope one of my favorite films because it has a fairly lengthy space battle right at the end. I think if you're bringing anybody new, and I had somebody I was talking to yesterday, of all things, who'd only seen the first film, The Phantom Menace, and then watched this new film. It was literally like, is this really how you end like a 9-series, film series? And I went, don't worry, it's all right. Just watch the middle 3. But I would accept that the Star Wars films themselves, I think what's happened is they've become the gold standard that everybody's tried to work towards to beat, and they have been beaten. There have been newer trilogies that have done a much better job at being an all-round fantastic experience. And I feel like looking back on Star Wars, if you look back at them as films in the time they came out, in the late 70s, early 80s, they absolutely blew everything out of the water, and everything tried to copy them. Because that's just, if you look at films from around then, the amount of Star Wars clones was just completely out there. So I think it is, if you're somebody who enjoys films, you will enjoy Star Wars. Maybe not become a Star Wars fan, but I still think you'll really enjoy the films. It's easier when you're younger because you have less things to compare it to. It makes being a fan a lot easier because as a kid, you've enjoyed things, you'll latch onto them and want to make that part of your, not identity, but you want to there's just so much Star Wars out there. You could literally lose yourself playing all the games, watching all the different TV series. Like,
that would be rare though, Andy. Like my girlfriend watched the original trilogy as an adult for the first time. She liked it, but I think that's an exception.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's still...
I think maybe part of it is a sort of selection bias. Like, if you're the sort of person who would enjoy Star Wars, you're probably going to see it or be shown it before a certain age. Just by chance.
Yeah, just to the fact that it's everywhere. You will end up seeing these Star Wars. I mean, it's linked in with Disney Plus now, so any kid who's watching like the early Disney films that everybody kind of knows just for the fact that they were the big kind of child movies of the time, you're just going to watch Star Wars as well. I mean, yeah, it owns so much of people's childhood that people are going to get exposed to it as a kid anyway. So they'll be Star Wars fans forever. Forever and ever.
What's your answer?
Yeah, so for me, actually, this is maybe where there's a bit of a point of difference, because I wouldn't call myself a Star Wars fan. I really like the original trilogy, and I've seen all the other movies, but I don't see, like you used the word identity, Andy. For me, like I think if you call yourself a fan of something, then it's not just enough to like it. Some small part of it has to be some small part of your identity. Like, if you're saying I am a fan, for me, that's you're saying some part of me identifies with this creative thing.
Yeah, and have the biases as well. Like, I find a lot of people that identify as fans, they're able to really ignore the crap. Whereas
I think some do. Like, I would consider you still a fan, and a truer fan, because you're critical of the stuff that you like. Because you're not just a shill who's always like, I love everything about Star Wars. Everything about Star Wars is amazing. I just want there to be more Star Wars. It's like,
I think the opposite. I think that imitation you just did sounds like a Star Wars fan. Star Wars.
Well, that doesn't sound like you, Carl. That doesn't sound like me. So does it mean that we're not fans?
I just identify.
But there is, of course, that thing of nobody hates Star Wars like a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Well, no one hates anything like a fan of that thing.
But that's right, and I think it's maybe it cuts both ways, or there's maybe two types of fans.
Yeah, a true fan, and then people who just jumped on the bandwagon.
But yeah, for me, that's not really the case. Like, I'm not in love with Star Wars, and I never have been. And maybe that comes down to the fact that I still saw it reasonably young. I don't remember exactly when was the first time I saw Star Wars. But certainly I saw Star Wars after all of my friends had. Like, well after. Because I remember I saw this thing from Star Wars, and I was like, I don't really know what this is. And people were like, what? You haven't seen Star Wars? And this was probably like primary school time, so I wasn't an adult or anything. So I don't consider myself a fan. I don't have merch. I don't really go for that kind of stuff. I don't go out and buy all the games. I don't watch the director's cuts. The director's commentaries. I'm not that interested. I mean, I have a passive interest. Like, for example, from a filmmaking perspective, a lot of the history of how the original Star Wars got made is really interesting. So, like, a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. And, of course, I know a lot about the universe, the technology and stuff. Because if you're interested, you can tend to look into... Well, especially, I have a fairly sort of curious kind of personality. And so that sort of leads into the second question. I think to become a fan of something, most of the time, it helps to have seen it as a child because it really imprints. I don't think it's necessarily like that because, again, Star Wars is a perfect example because most of the people who saw Star Wars when it came out were not children. They probably would have been teenagers or, let's say, young adults. But it still made quite an impression on them and on the wider culture as a whole. So, but yeah, I don't have a conclusive answer one way or the other. That's why I was sort of curious to see what you said.
I think it's easier to get people into anything as long as the actual the product that they're having, like the movie in this case, is really good. It's a lot easier to get people into a series or a franchise or something if the quality's there. And that's always been my problem with the new Star Wars and the prequels, is that they never reached the quality that the original trilogy had. And to me, the movies always set the tone for everything else. So you could show people like a game, like I've got a workmate who's playing some of the new Force Awakens games. He's really enjoyed those, but it's just like it's.
If you wanted to know, like, well, if you're not a Star Wars fan, despite the fact that you talk about Star Wars with your friends all the goddamn time, I would say that I consider myself more of a Star Trek fan. Like, when I was young, like, I used to love Star Trek. I still love Star Trek.
I remember.
Ooh.
You were a crazy Star Trek fan. You had the toys, the
Yeah.
Duna covers.
But, like, that also left, like, a really long-lasting impression on me. And, like, even these days, I'm not as enthusiastic about the newer stuff, but I'll still watch it. I'm still curious about it. I'm interested in the universe. And I go for a lot of the online discussions and the fan theories and stuff. I really like that. So I mean, if you guys were Star Trek fans, then I guarantee we will be doing 10 episodes of Star Trek discussion every day.
Well, now I'm trying to work out if I'm a bigger Star Wars or Star Trek fan.
That's.
But the important thing, there's always been like this historical idea of Star Trek versus Star Wars. You have to be one or the other. But I think most people who are fans of one will enjoy the other. Well, maybe not Star Wars. Star Wars has broader appeal. But if you like Star Trek, I think most people like Star Wars as well. Which is why we can continue with our Star Wars discussion, Carl.
Speaking of original trilogy, there has been a unanimous kind of internet just saying that when the original trilogy was altered in the special editions, it's kind of just unanimous that they were altered for the worse when George Lucas went back and made changes to those movies. Now, we can go on, and I don't want to contribute to that conversation because there are so many videos detailing what those changes were and why they were bad. But I don't hear people talking about the positives of the changes. Are there positives? I think I can think of for the most part. I think we are all in agreement. We don't need to say this, that the original cuts are better. Okay? I think we can all agree on that. The special editions shouldn't have happened. But I think that it might be worth talking about. There could be some small things here and there that are better about the special editions that are worth discussing. Andy, can you think of something about the special editions of the original trilogy that you think were actually a positive change?
Well, I think if you're looking at the way, so I'm trying to remember, New Hope came out in 77 or 78.
77.
When did The Last Jedi come out?
Not
The Last Jedi. The Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi. 83.
83. So you've had 5-6 years for the LucasArts team, the Industrial Light and Magic, as they were called back then, still I think. Yep. To improve the technology that they used to do all the space battle scenes and everything. And as I just said before, I love the space battles. I love the aesthetics of all the ships and designs and everything. Making those look a bit more, what's the word? Bringing those effects from the older films up to the newer films and trying to kind of make it look a bit more standardized. I think, to me, considering a lot of the other things in the films are quite, like, they really follow through the different films quite well. Like, the sets, the stormtrooper designs, the weapons, the effects for the lightsabers, all pretty spot on throughout the whole film. It's just maybe, I think, with the special editions, they make changes to the aliens. But irregardless...
Was it jarring for you when you watched the original cuts, when you went back and watched those? I think it was last year.
Yeah.
Was it jarring to see how the spaceships, the way they moved and things was different?
Definitely, because some of the effects they had didn't hold up as well as some of the scenes that they'd kept from in the special edition unaltered. Like, the bit where they're entering into the trench is still a fantastic, absolutely fantastic scene. And you look at it, you're going, how did they do that before CGI? Like, the actual magic that those special effects artists had, like they had in their hands, they made it work. They made that they're the half the reason, more than half probably, that film really just blew everything out of the water. So I can understand, standardizing those effects to bring things a bit more up to date with how the latest film came out and do something like that. That's fine. My problem is...
so you're talking the difference between Return of the Jedi and A New Hope?
Yeah, that's fine. Because that's fine. That trilogy, keeping in that decade is fine to me, because it feels jarring to have, old footage from, 80s and 70s with all little mistakes and colouring it has, and then right next to modern day CGI, like they did in Rogue One. Like, it just doesn't feel quite right. You instantly see the difference.
Rogue One?
Yeah, in Rogue One. They had scenes from the trench run. They had... what they did is they took second reels, and so they had Red Leader 1 and Yellow Leader or something, and they literally just cut them in quick, and it would have been a little cameo, and it's not too bad, but I instantly went, that's old footage, that instantly doesn't look right, and it ruins the film. It breaks you out of it.
Just briefly on the space scenes, I was watching a comparison leading up to this podcast just to get reminded of what they changed. The R2-D2 shots when he's in space on the X-Wing are actually black and white in the original cut because of the way they just couldn't use the way they used the film to actually produce the space background. They couldn't colour in R2-D2.
Yeah.
So he's actually grayscale.
It's fascinating
looking
at it. Yeah, it's fascinating looking at the technology they did to make those space scenes work. It's really good.
But we're not talking about those slight technical issues.
Yeah, that's fine.
For the most part.
I mean, as long as it's not too gaudy, and I think that's where the special editions went wrong. Like, they just went, oh wow, we got tons of money, we got all this time, we can literally just change...
They just chuck CGI.
They just chuck CGI
things
anywhere.
Floating around in the background of every shot on Mos Eisley.
Yeah.
Like, the stormtrooper walks up to... I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but seriously,
Yeah.
there is just like a little thing zipping around in the background of every shot.
Yeah, and so much of it looks fine the way it was before they went, now we're going to CGI that. CGI all that shit, yeah.
The good stuff, Adam. You think of anything?
Okay, so for me, if you go and look at fan restorations of the original films, most of them are really purist exercises, right? They try to get what's the original source that's the least touched by history, you know? And I can appreciate that. But if you're going to make a special edition, there are also some fan projects which do some minor fixes, which are, grain removal, color corrections, stuff like the R2-D2 thing, coloring in details, fixes like I don't know if you remember in the Death Star, there's the turbo lasers have different colors. If they're the inside shots and the outside shots, one's red, one's green, fixes like that. That's for me like bare minimum what special edition should be, right? Mostly fixes and just improvements to general quality. You can maybe also talk about upscaling, but that's a different kind of thing. There are also a couple of things, like, for example, one thing which I like in the special editions is there's injections of little scenes that help the pacing or make for smoother connections, like they slightly changed when the Millennium Falcon leaves Tatooine. They just did a little change. Look, if you haven't seen it, Google it. Stuff like that is okay for me. Slightly more controversial, maybe minor fixes to sort of fix the continuity between the different films. I know
Are you talking about like Boba Fett's voice, things like that?
Yeah, things like that, which are not necessarily an issue, but if you're going to be doing changes anyway, then that's one potential thing which you could make an argument for. I don't think it's a problem, but it's interesting actually. One of the defenses I've heard of, against Disney should have planned out this whole trilogy was, well, they didn't do that with the original trilogy. Of course, George Lucas says he had a plan for the things, and then people say, oh, really, Luke and Leia were going to be brother and sister, and they make it out in the first movie. But I think that's different. Like, George Lucas had a very rough, overarching idea of the main, this is this person, this is that person.
He didn't anticipate 2 Death Stars, is what you're saying. I think he
yeah,
really,
but he probably had an idea of, okay, well,
they'll
Darth
come
Vader
back.
is, yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah, okay, so
no big changes like when they redid Palpatine in Empire Strikes Back from the
is it glue on his face or something like
no
that?
no. So that's actually the original Palpatine before.
well, that would be an example of maybe a continuity fix. I would be okay with putting the later Palpatine's face over how he first appeared, which was like that weird monkey hybrid.
Yeah, so it was a female's face with a chimpanzee's eye glued on with a male's voice dubbed over. I don't think it's too bad because it's so fuzzy, you can't really tell.
But that would be an example of a change I would be okay with. But that's that's about it. I don't think you need to do any more than that. I think keep it clean, keep it minimal. Little touch up of paint here and there is all you need.
My one change that I think, if I could only pick one change that is okay in my books, is purists will hate me for saying this because they have a real connection to the ending song in Return of the Jedi called Nub Nub or something.
Nub Nub, yeah.
I can play a clip of it in here, but I think that when they changed that, it was just a bit out of it. Like, I know as a kid people like that, but the dramatic John Williams score that they replaced it with at the end of Return of the Jedi, where everyone's hugging and then Luke sees the ghost of Vader and everything. I'm not talking about the changes adding Hayden Christensen.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. The music.
Just the music, I think, is way better than Nub Nub.
And I think even amongst the purists, there's a lot of, it's like split down the middle 50-50, right? Yeah. And a lot of them have 2 versions, one with one score and one with the other.
It's a better score for an ending. For an ending of an epic saga, Nub Nub was just really... Yeah. And this is... And I'm not going to mention... I know you guys know I love Jedi Rocks from Return of the Jedi. But I know... I just love it because, like, I'm an idiot sometimes. I don't actually think it is positive being in there, but I do kind of like Jedi Rocks. Which is the... Yeah.
So it's all right to like things that you have no right liking. It's fine. Like, it's just that bad. Yeah.
Can you think of any more changes, or that's
that I think are okay?
That are good, that were positive?
Oof. I think Adam hit a lot of those on the nails. Like any kind of bloopers or something that people missed in the mad rush to get Star Wars out. That's fine going back. I think the biggest thing would be with the special editions, and I think where a lot of people had issues with was that they never kept, like, they did it over the original copies of the master tapes, didn't they? So there is no original copy.
Well, there is now. Google 4K 77.
Oh, yeah. But that's...
I don't endorse that. I own legal copies. I own legal copies of all the Star Wars films. I can take photos, but they have found 35mm prints. But I know they're not masters.
Anything we say which could be construed as promoting illegal activity is strictly meant as a joke, not a recommendation.
Exactly.
But I think people are happy if they can show people the movie or watch the movie that they saw. They might have some fond memories of that, or maybe they don't like the changes. The way films go and the way they're shot, it's... it could be a real mixed bag. I was watching The Good, the Bad, the Ugly Blu-ray. They added in all these extra scenes that had been cut out of the original theatrical release, and they were shit.
Yeah, they do that a lot with films. Like, they add in scenes that there was a reason why they were cut. More is not always better.
I only wish, and the biggest thing with The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is that the audio was completely screwed up for those scenes, so that everything sounded different. You instantly knew it was the wrong scene, and which comes at my point where try and make it all as legit as possible. But it's like, as long as you have an option to cut that out, I think people would have been fine with the special edition if they still had the original ones. They could just cut that out at the same quality.
Apocalypse Now, the Redux is boring as shit. Like, I watched that. I was like, I don't get what the fuss is about with this film. Like, I actually thought Martin Sheen was a good actor till I watched it, and then I went back like 5 years later and I watched the theatrical cut. I'm like, this is how it should have been.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't mind Redux.
You were just sitting there watching Redux cut, going, the horror.
Yeah, it's
The horror.
Like, I don't need to see 30 minutes of Marlon Brando sweating off his
his HSP.
His HSP on his break in between takes.
Oh, hearing stories
but-
about that's amazing. That story, Miles Brando, he did not give a single fucking...
One thing which you brought
That's
up,
his whole career.
I
Yeah.
think there's been a real trend in recent years to have longer and longer films.
Yeah.
Because like the other day, Andy, I was showing you This Is Spinal Tap, which is an excellent movie if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, great. Would recommend.
It was the first time he'd seen it. I remember at the end, we sort of checked the time and you went, oh, that wasn't a very long movie. But the thing is, like, it's just 80 minutes. And for a comedy, that's, I think, a good amount of time. Comedies especially don't need to be super long movies. Although these days there are no comedy films anymore. There's action comedies or adventure comedies. There's no straight comedies.
Or comedies starring your favourite Marvel characters.
But like, even like I remember 15 years ago, like 100 minutes for a comedy would be the absolute maximum. But now everything gets stretched out to be 2.5 hours, which I think is probably partly the influence of Lord of the Rings on one hand, like the epic, this idea that people will sit and watch a 3-hour movie and not complain if it's good enough. But that's the other thing, the increasing tendency of Hollywood to focus on blockbusters, which, you know, skews things. But anyway, we're getting very much off topic now.
Yeah, definitely.
So, not everyone here listening to the podcast is a Star Wars fan. We want to talk about something else.
Yep.
We do a lot of traveling, and surprisingly, although I say we love travel, and I think it's a redundant statement, there are actually people out there that don't travel.
I don't know if I'd say I love travel.
Okay, well, I like travel.
I
and you would
love travel.
Yeah, but there are people that just, in my life, that have no interest in going abroad. But
Yeah, and also people who can't afford it or whatever.
for whatever reason.
The first time I went overseas...
Health reasons.
Yeah, the first time I went overseas was to study. I had never been overseas for fun before that. In fact, I've never been overseas for fun since exactly. I'm still overseas and studying, and I only travel very, very rarely. That's not for work.
But you had an interesting topic.
So my question was, so what I find is that a lot of people, when they do travel to go to tour, not even necessarily overseas, but even domestically, a lot of them go for different things, different reasons. Like what sort of places attract you, first of all? So there's two questions. What sort of places attract you? Because I know, for example, Carl is definitely more interested in different sort of places to Andy, different sort of places to me. And second of all, when you're visiting a new place, a new town or city, or if you're out in nature or whatever, what sort of places do you go to? Like, what's your checklist of, okay, I'm in a new city. Do you go for the really touristy parts? Do you go for like the historical stuff? Do you go for the culture, going around the coffee shops, like that sort of thing? So why don't we start with Carl?
So one thing right off the bat is that I don't like holidays where I'm sitting and relaxing on a beach or a resort or something like that. I have to actually experience that culture to a large extent. I can't just have relaxing holidays in the Maldives or anything like that. I have to be going for the most part. I can have a relaxing day here and there. As for touristy things, or I do a bit of both. I would say I do a bit more touristy things in the sense that I like to learn about the country I'm in for the most part. I want to come back with a very deep knowledge of like the historical context, political context, things like that. I do like to have various days where I really try and get in the culture. Like I really like taking off my camera, not looking like a tourist, and going out for the night and really trying to get in with the locals, but not to the extent of a lot of other people. A lot of other people will not do any of the touristy things. they just want to stay in a homestay and really just get on that cultural deep level, I would only spend about 30% of my holiday doing that. I am a sucker for, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a sucker for souvenir shops even. But I do like to go to a lot of unconventional places as well. Some places that are a bit too, I don't know how to put it, but some places can bore me unless they have like something uniquely interesting going on. And I also like going off the beaten path and giving places a chance that a lot of other people don't give a chance, because I think I have the best adventures there. Because a lot of these places that aren't tourist destinations, in air quotes, like they're not the Paris, they're not the Venice. When I've given them a chance, like, what's this place? I've never heard of that. I'm just going to give it a crack. I find there's such a positive reception from the people there, and I have such a better time because it's like I gave this small place a chance, and yeah, you get where I'm coming from. With
Definitely.
I mean, even like for me, where I currently study is in a relatively small city in Italy.
Yeah.
And like when people find out I'm Australian, they're like, "Wow, like someone from Australia is here!" Like it's a really different reaction.
I don't even go just for that shock value. That's nice, but like that people are grateful that you gave a place a chance. But also we get ingrained in pop culture, like the amount of times I've seen a Paris street just in movies, TV shows, books depicting it, all this stuff. Like we get ingrained with that, and it's kind of nice to see somewhere completely interesting that you have no image in your mind of what it's going to look like other than maybe like a quick Google search.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I feel like with my history with my family, we've travelled quite a bit. We've done Africa, Europe, we've done a fair bit of Southeast Asia now. But the way that my family did it, we got in the back of an old camper van, that was, full of rust and everything, and we'd literally just drive around and, see the sights, see a lot of country towns. Yeah, we were in the back of a Land Rover, but yeah, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
We had friends who were over there, so we went and stayed with them.
And you really do, like, Andy, you're not afraid to camp. You're not afraid to you don't have to stay in a nice hotel.
In fact, that's one thing I really do not like. I don't like staying in nice hotels for maybe once off or twice if you've had like a really rough stint, but I really enjoy the backpacking experience. I feel like people in backpacking places, you get good stories out of there, or you hear good stories from other people. And I generally, when I travel, I find that, and I found this more often recently, I'll look at a place and I'm like, I'm not too interested in seeing some of the really big sites. Like, they don't quite grab me as much. The way that you can see videos and images of stuff, it's like, it kind of robs the uniqueness of actually being there and seeing some of them. But it's the people around, the people who live there, the little lives that you get kind of entwined with while you're running around doing your own thing. I really enjoy getting out and experiencing the culture of a nation or a country is kind of one of the biggest things I find. Learning about it, knowing about it, and trying to interact with that and getting a bit out of it, I find it's better. And being off the beaten path is the easiest way to do that. Because, like we were just talking about before, it's like tourist traps. People just want your money. They want you to get out of there. Like they don't want to have a chat with you. You're a customer rather than a traveler. And I find, you meet very interesting people overseas, and I think it's really good for your state of mind, and also kind of seeing how seeing the humanity in everybody. Because
it's so important. Like, people have just this idea of certain places based on a current affair in the news, and when you say like, it's really not like that. Like there are a lot of really experienced travelers out there that write blogs and things like that, and they go to a lot of these places, and everyone's human in these. You talked about small things. I thought the most interesting part of Italy, you're going to think I'm crazy here, but and we did a lot of touristy things in Italy, but the small thing of how they drink coffee, that stood out the most. And
really?
I kept saying to Adam, like, what? And Adam's like, it's not that big of a deal, but I'm just like, I can't get over this.
Well, let our listeners know.
Okay,
what did you have beef with?
So I can't speak about everywhere in Italy. I didn't go to Florence. It could be different in other cities, but for the most part, what I saw in Italy is, other than a lot of countries neighbouring where people sit down, have a coffee for an hour, and like it is in Australia, with their busy lives, Italians like to go order a coffee, usually a short black espresso. They'll order it at the bar. they will take the 2 sips it takes to down it, say thank you and goodbye. They don't sit down. It's a 3-minute procedure, 3 to 5 minute procedure, and they go.
Wow, it's clinical. It's almost like,
Yeah,
I need a
it's
shot of
like-
caffeine, give it to me now.
Yeah, like, and move on with it. Would you say I accurately explained that?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty common.
Yeah. So,
Not to say that people don't
yeah, it was
sit
a lot
down
of...
and have a coffee.
It was a lot of the older
But,
crowd I saw sitting down and drinking coffee together, but
Yeah,
the younger
or
crowd...
like if you're catching up with someone you haven't seen in a long time.
Mm.
But yeah, the standard everyday thing is definitely go to the bar, down a coffee shot, and then on your way.
Because I couldn't imagine going to a coffee place in Australia and saying, can I get a short black? And they go, where are you sitting? I'm like, no, I'm just going to have right here. Like, just chuck it
Yeah,
down here.
no.
That's not really a thing here.
But also, like the coffee is prepared differently. It's served at a lower temperature, precisely so that people can do that. You know.
Yeah.
But the thing is, watching, I love people watching. I love meeting interesting characters. So we did it's stuff like that where you just be looking around and seeing what is the norm in this place, and then feeling like completely out of touch. Like in Japan, ordering food there is completely different to here. You'd be on these tiny little noodle bars. Or like ordering off a machine. That took us about 10 minutes to work out. All the poor Japanese people being very patient with us. But then you're all just sitting at a bar in front of the kitchen. They're cooking and making the food in front of you. And there's just this vibe of friendliness. And it's like you're in someone else's kitchen and they're making your food. You know, it really is out there. And then that was a place in Tokyo. When we went out to Fuji, we literally just went to the only place we kind of went to regularly was this tiny little like family-owned restaurant. It was just the husband and wife. She was the waitress and kind of the accountant. He was just cooking there. And it was just that all the locals would just pop in. And it was just like, just the vibe you got at that kind of place. Like you just sat there and went, you wouldn't get this anywhere else. I really just enjoyed, seeing everybody, like this is the norm for them, you know?
And you do start to realize as well, like I didn't start traveling till I was in 2021, 22, somewhere around there. And like the idea that your culture, you view that what I do in my everyday life in my part of the world, that's the best way, completely goes out of the water the more you travel, because really the way I do things in my life in Australia isn't the best way for a lot of things. I'll go to this country, I'm like, the way they do things here for that particular thing, the way they eat this meal, the way they see their friends and socialize, the way they take the train to work, all this, they're doing it better here, doing it better here, doing it better there. And I think that's an important learning experience compared to a lot of people that don't travel and just like, my way's best.
Yeah, and it informs you a lot more about all the news and decisions you hear coming from the world. Like someone from Africa or from Japan might have this opinion, or China, whatever. And like initially might be like, well, that's just an idiot. Why would you ever think that? You know, once you actually go there, meet the people, talk to them, like get to know them, get that context. It's just like you suddenly go, oh, I can actually see from your shoes. I can understand why, you'd be so defensive about this, or you consider, like any traditions that we would think are completely normal, and they just be like, what the hell are you doing? Like,
but with hotels, I get totally in the nitty gritty throughout the day when I'm overseas. I go out in the morning till night. I'll do whatever. I'll eat whatever. I'll go wherever. I have way not enough fear of places like stupid.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that gets out of the car on an African safari when I'm told a million times not to. But when I go back at the end of the night, I want a nice clean bed. I can't. I will pay for a hotel and a nice hotel, and it means nothing to me about sleeping in an area.
Nothing's worth more to you than a clean bed. A clean soft bed. That makes everything after a hard day out.
I'm not busting my ass the whole year at work. I get 4 weeks off, and I'm not going to. At the very least, I'm going to stay in a bed. I'm not going to camp. I didn't work that hard for that.
Yeah.
What about you,
Adam?
You haven't talked much.
Yeah, for me, it's probably a little bit different to both of you. So, like I said, I wouldn't say I travel that much to tour exactly. Like a lot of the time when I go to a new place, it's either going to be a day trip to a town that's a couple of hours away or something, or it's going to be going to a conference where you don't see much of the town. But anytime I go to a new city, my first impression is always, all right, where's the cathedral? If it's like a big European old town cathedral, where's the castles? Where's the museums? That sort of stuff really interests me. I really
you
like
your views as well. You're big on like the best view spot.
yeah,
I find.
if I can, if you know, if it's easy to get to, nice views. I also like just walking around the city. Like, for example, I don't mind going to a really touristy place, but I don't typically actually go inside the big tourist attractions. Maybe I'll do it once, just for like, all right, check it off the list. But for me, just being in that kind of place is enough. Being at street level, like when I went to Paris, like people can say that maybe they weren't that impressed by the Eiffel Tower or whatever. But for me, just like seeing it from different angles, from different parts of town, it's like it's neat, it's novel, it's fun, it's nice, and it's not always the same as like when you see it on TV. Because of course on TV they always go for that. There's that one picturesque angle that everyone uses, and it gives you a different, very much more three-dimensional perspective. Same thing like the Arc de Triomphe is fucking massive, which is not something that you really appreciate on film compared to being there in person. It's also like if you're out in nature, I'm not the sort of multi-day hike camping sort of person. I don't normally go for that. I do like a bit of hike though. I do like being out in nature very, very occasionally. But
Pyongyang's Arc of Triumph is bigger. They wanted to make it bigger.
and therefore better.
The story behind that arch is also bloody fantastic as well. I really enjoyed that one.
The story behind the Arc of Triumph.
Whoever's interested can look it up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
I'm talking now.
Sorry.
But
Moldova had a little Arc of Triumph as well.
What's the capital of Laos? They had one too.
Oh my god!
No
one cares about your second-rate arches.
Well, that was what I was referring to.
The original.
The original.
But if you go to, for example, if you're out on a hike, and this is something I'm sure at least Andy will be able to say something about, maybe you too, Carl, you'll get a fantastic view. Maybe there'll be mountains or a big valley or a canyon or something, and you're like, wow, this is really amazing. And then you'll take a picture, and even if you've got like a good camera, even if you've got like great settings and everything, you'll go back and you look at the picture and it's like, yeah, but it's not quite the same. And the difference is that sense of three-dimensionality that you just can't get from a picture. Like when you're there and you can see it, and maybe there's like also that sensational aspect of there's a bit of a breeze or something, makes a big difference. And like it's the same thing if you're being down in the city, just like being surrounded by a totally different style of architecture, being around people who are speaking a different language maybe. Just being able to sort of, and also being on holiday, you don't have to work. If you want to sit down at a cafe and have a coffee in the middle of the afternoon, you can do that. That's just fun being on holiday stuff, but that's the sort of stuff that I really enjoy. Just, in a sense, being in a new place. I don't go for necessarily like, I want to slum it with the locals. I want to get a slice of their life, because I never feel like I would actually succeed in any way, but...
You know what annoys me?
I also don't normally go, like for me, I don't go in hostels because I fucking just hate being around people.
Oh, some of the people you meet in hostels as well, you never want to meet them again. They're the dregs of society.
I also never really go for a really fancy hotel. I mean, I wouldn't be able to afford it anyway, but like for me, a decent mid-range hotel is more than enough. Again, clean bed is fine, but otherwise, I just love walking around, being in a new place, learning about the history. That's what I normally go for.
You know what shits me when I'm overseas and I come back and I talk about it? When people like, I go to, for example, like a capital city and do touristy things, and then someone who's like from there or been there a lot goes like, oh, but that's not the real France. And then I go to another place and I won't go to the capital city. I'll go to like a small area or something with the locals, and they'll go, and then someone will say, no, but you haven't been to the capital. Where you went, that's not the real way. I'm like, and then there will always be that person.
It's almost like people have different experiences.
Yeah. It's like if you go to Darwin in Australia and kick it with the locals there, I'd say you've had an Australian experience, and that's just as real as going to Melbourne and going to down Flinders Lane.
Yeah, it'll be different.
It's different, but that's still real Australia. It's just another section. Because I do both. Like, I've when I was in Vietnam, I didn't go to Hanoi, and people are like, "Well, you haven't been to the capital, so that's not the real Vietnam." But I'm like, "Yeah, but I kicked it in the local towns in where on the outskirts and stuff." And someone might say that's the real Vietnam. Like,
would you say it's more for like the big capital cities of various countries? Because I know some people would say like if you visited London or New York, people would be like, "Oh, that's not." Like, that's a different kind of culture to the rest of, say, England.
Like a bubble.
Yeah, it's a bubble. It's a lot more cosmopolitan, a lot more global.
It is. But
yeah.
it is where the majority of people live.
It
so
is,
could
but...
you say that that's the main culture?
We'll see. Well,
tricky question.
If anything, it's kind of like the hub that plugs into the rest of the world. So it's a mix of everything plus the original native culture as well mixed in there. Like, it's the native flavor of, you know, the global culture.
I get where you're coming from, like, for example, because it's capitals are a lot more multicultural, but if someone came to Australia, like, I would like them to see Melbourne as Australia, but let's be honest, they don't want to see Melbourne as Australia. If they're a tourist, they want to see how the bloody hell are ya, like, out, like, they want the, like...
If you're here for 2 weeks, I would probably say you can give Melbourne a skip. But if you're here for like a month or 6 weeks, then I would go the opposite way and say you have to go to Melbourne.
Yeah,
because Melbourne's the sort of place. It's best experience. Like, it's not like Sydney where it's got the Harbour Bridge, it's got the Opera House, it's got the big views and stuff. But it's more of an interesting place to be in, I think.
I'd disagree with you. I think like if you had 2 weeks, put a stop in Melbourne. But yeah, it's true. Like, Sydney's got all the iconic, like, touristy spots.
But there's a lot of things to see in Australia.
I know.
If you're only going to go once in your life, go to the Reef.
Yeah.
Go to Uluru. You don't. I mean, Melbourne at the end of the day is a great city, but it's still a city. And
it's true. If you want to work somewhere in Melbourne, Melbourne's pretty good.
Yeah.
But
if you want to live in Australia,
Melbourne's pretty good. But yeah, if you've seen all the tourist, pamphlets and all the photos people send of Australia and watch any kind of Australian film, it's going to be going out the outback, going up to the Daintree, up to Queensland, seeing the Reef while it's still there. That kind of stuff.
So one more question just to wrap up this topic. There's a fun thing sometimes. I don't know how much weight it holds, but there are some things which there's a conventional wisdom that people can always be put in one or two camps. Like people who do a lot of extreme sports, I've been told, you're either you'll either do scuba diving or you'll do skydiving, and there's very few people who enjoy both. Like some people just have more one than the other, and for some strange reason, what attracts people to one sort of pushes people away from the other one. And I've heard that one of these examples is like the difference between being a beach going person and being a mountain going person. So I would say, for you, would you say you're more of a beach person or more of a mountain person?
I think I know where you're going from. This is just like a metaphor.
No.
Oh,
I'm being completely literal, yeah.
Oh, okay. So,
it's a simple question,
What did you think it was a metaphor for?
I thought metaphor for like people who like the extremes or people that like the passive, like scuba diving is like passive, more passive.
Well, not really.
Yeah, well, like...
You can infer a lot, but it's just like, would you prefer a beach or would you prefer a mountain?
Yeah, no, I'm being extremely service level
Beach, 100%.
Well, that's exactly what I mean, though. Like, if you're saying 100% beach, then it's like you're 0% mountain.
Yeah, I'm probably 0% mountain. I'll probably climb half a mountain in my whole entire lifetime. That's what I probably will. I haven't even climbed a mountain. Doesn't interest me.
Is this counting like, all right, I went 5% up this mountain, that contributes to that half a mountain?
Maybe, but I have not a legit mountain. I haven't been up. I've seen mountains. I'm happy to look at them. Doesn't interest me climbing them.
Yeah, Andy?
Yeah, I'm a mountain person. I was thinking
100% mountain?
Yeah, I was thinking I'd be like 80% mountain, 20% beach, but yeah, like all I do at the beach is just hang out with the family, build sandcastles and stuff. That's boring. Let's do it. I've climbed tons of mountains. I've climbed some of the Himalayas. I've climbed some of the Victorian Alps.
Boring.
Boring?
Boring!
Sitting at a beach is just like, oh, well, the waves come in, the waves come out.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
I love it.
climbed up a rock that's on an incline.
And I got to the top and I saw a view
like
that
everyone
few
else.
men had ever seen.
What have I done?
Fight.
I'm tearing this podcast apart.
Wait, Adam. You haven't answered the question, Adam. Are you a beach person or
God.
a mountain person?
I'm scared to answer now. Everyone's leaning towards me menacingly. So this is probably an accident of upbringing, but I'm more of a beach person.
Damn it! Damn it!
I would say, like, for me, going into the mountains is a real novelty, and I really love it. Like, I enjoy it. Like, the scenery you get in the mountains, not necessarily climbing the mountains. I'm a very lazy person. But just being up in the mountains, you see things that you would never see in a million years before. Like a mountain lake, shade of blue against the snow-capped mountain is, like, amazing, stunning.
Some pretty nice beaches as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's less interesting aesthetically. But in terms of, like, what I would do, I love to be out in the surf. I love to swim. I love to build sandcastles and, like, even, like, mini dumb engineering projects. Like, I'm going to build a channel and channel the seawater into the... I don't know, just dumb shit like that.
Gorge.
Yeah,
Moat.
I enjoy that and being walking around the rocks, that sort of stuff.
To be fair, I enjoy those too. Like, being at a beach and relaxing there is really nice, but I thought it had to be an either or, so now.
Changing your mind now, mountain person.
I've never
Peer
changed my
pressure.
mind. The view from a mountain is just, you just can't beat it. And what comes with that is the effort you've gone to get there. So, you know, camping on top of a mountain or, you know, just sitting up at the stars above you, it's just amazing.
I get over views.
The only views that Carl doesn't get over are views on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment.
Nice segue, Adam. I like it. We'll make a YouTuber out of you yet.
Yeah, we'll keep pumping out these podcasts plug our SoundCloud. Also might set up a FMG podcast. Well, we've got our FMG podcast at gmail.com for suggestions, but
If you've got any comments, any suggestions,
if you
anything
want
like
to if you want to send money to our PayPal to support our SoundCloud subscription, maybe $1, keep this alive.
We can even afford some more things for our audio equipment or a recording room.
We get that complaint as well.
I don't know about. Well, we'll see. This is also our last podcasting session together in the same room for a long time. I'm going back to Italy in a couple of days, so
Keep it going though, like we always do.
Well, yeah, always.
We're upping it now with this SoundCloud subscription. It's going to be keep going.
I know. Well, I guess the next big one will have to be in Trieste, maybe. Like when we're all
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
Well, Andrew hasn't yet. I'm still waiting on Andrew.
Hey, I visited you in Nottingham. That's good enough. I was there before everybody else thought it was cool.
But anyway, we'll catch you guys on the next podcast.
Yep, thanks for listening.
Ciao.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
See ya.